MIL excluded me from the family vacation at the last minute, so my husband and I planned the ultimate petty revenge and left without them. A few days ago, my husband's family and I were getting ready for a family vacation. His family has a yearly tradition. They pick a destination, take a week off, and go on a group trip. My husband, Lucas, 31M, and I, Lauren, 29F, recently got married, though we've been together for over 3 years. This was my first time being invited to participate, and I was genuinely excited. Last year, when we were engaged, Lucas had asked me to come along, but since his family hadn't officially invited me, I felt uncomfortable joining. This year was different. His mother, Patricia, personally invited me, which felt significant because I had always sensed that Patricia didn't really approve of me. While she wasn't openly rude, she never made an effort to make me feel welcome and was noticeably colder toward me than toward others. I suspect her distant attitude started when Lucas and I began dating, and he moved out of their family home to live with me. That's when her behavior shifted, though she tried to hide it. It was obvious she wasn't thrilled that I was the reason her son moved out. I've always been independent and had lived on my own since college, so moving in with Lucas's parents was never an option I even considered. For me, living with in-laws, or even too close to them, was a firm no, both before and after marriage. Lucas and I had discussed this early in our relationship. I was upfront about needing personal space and independence, and he agreed. He had grown up with little to no privacy, so he was happy with the idea of having our own place. Patricia, however, seemed to have different expectations. She strongly believed that families should live together under one roof or, at the very least, close enough to see each other daily. Lucas's older sister, Hannah, for example, moved out after getting married, but settled just a few houses away. Hannah and her family visit Patricia practically every day. Patricia's concept of family closeness clashed with my desire for independence. While Lucas was content with our living situation, Patricia seemed to quietly blame me for taking him away from the family. That's the only explanation I have for her behavior toward me. I've always been polite and tried hard to fit in, but it never seemed to be enough. Everything came to a head just a few days before the vacation. Patricia mentioned, almost casually, that she still didn't consider me part of the family, even though Lucas and I had been married for several months by then. I was stunned, especially because I had been actively involved in planning the trip for weeks. Normally, Lucas's parents cover all the expenses for these vacations, as they're financially comfortable, and I had assumed this trip would follow the same pattern. I had assumed this trip would follow the same arrangement as usual, where my in-laws covered all the expenses. Lucas had assured me we didn't need to worry about money. Just to be clear, I wouldn't have minded paying for myself if needed, but since I was told otherwise, I didn't budget for it. The day before we were supposed to leave, Patricia invited me over to discuss some final trip details. I went alone because Lucas was finishing up work before his vacation. When I arrived, she sat me down and explained that although this was meant to be a family vacation, and she and her husband typically covered all costs, they didn't consider me family yet. Patricia said they felt they didn't know me well enough and, as a result, expected me to pay for myself. She added that I shouldn't make a big deal out of it because that would ruin the vacation vibe, and she didn't want to start the trip off on a bad note. But then, she made it worse by saying that one of the reasons she didn't consider me part of the family was because Lucas and I didn't visit them as often as the others. Unlike her son-in-law, who was around frequently, she barely saw me and didn't feel close enough to me. I was deeply hurt. I tried so hard to get along with Patricia and the rest of the family, even though it was clear Patricia didn't fully approve of me. What hurt the most was that she had led me to believe I was part of the family by involving me in the trip planning, only to drop this bombshell the day before we were supposed to leave. If she'd been upfront from the beginning, I would have been fine paying for myself, but springing it on me at the last minute felt unnecessarily cruel. Despite how upset I was, I stayed calm and didn't let my feelings show. I told her I understood her perspective and that I would pay for myself. Patricia seemed surprised at how composed I was, as though she'd expected me to react differently. I didn't stick around to chat any longer and went straight home, doing my best to hold back tears. When I got home, Lucas immediately noticed I was upset and asked me what had happened. After I explained everything, he was furious. He said he had no interest in going on the trip after the way his mother had insulted me and suggested canceling the vacation entirely. I told Lucas that I'd suspected for a while that Patricia didn't like me. I'd noticed her behavior had shifted after Lucas moved out to live with me and how she had grown colder over time. At first, I thought it was just a silly theory, but now it felt like the truth. Her comments about me not visiting enough and her refusal to see me as family only confirmed my suspicions. When I told Lucas everything, he admitted my suspicions might be true. He'd always known how much family meant to Patricia. She had been upset when he told her he was moving out to live with me and that he didn't want to rent a house closer to her because he valued his personal space. Although Patricia hadn't openly shown her feelings, it seemed likely she blamed me for his decision and still held a grudge. While that explained her behavior, it didn't excuse her cruelty or her attempt to humiliate me right before our vacation. I felt awful. As we talked, Lucas suggested canceling the trip and confronting her, but that didn't feel like enough. I wanted her to experience the same hurt and exclusion I had. Together, we came up with a plan. We'd meet the family at the airport as scheduled but secretly take a flight somewhere else, leaving them behind. By the time they figured out what was happening, we'd already be gone. The plan was simple and foolproof, and we carried it out. The next day, we arrived at the airport and met the family as planned. We mingled for a bit before excusing ourselves, saying we wanted to take some photos. While the family was busy chatting, we headed to the counter and purchased 2 tickets for the earliest available flight to a destination we liked. We chose San Francisco. Originally, we were supposed to go to Miami, but this last-minute change turned out to be perfect. It was just the 2 of us, without anyone around who didn't like me. By the time we boarded the plane, Patricia and the rest of the family realized something was off. They called and texted us repeatedly, but we ignored every message. Thankfully, airports are big enough that they couldn't track us down in time. Without any confrontation or drama, we boarded the flight and left. Once we landed in San Francisco, we decided to address the situation. Lucas sent a message in the family group chat, explaining everything. He told them what Patricia had said to me the day before, and how it made me feel excluded and unwelcome. He added that since the vacation was supposed to be a family event, and I wasn't considered family, we thought it best to remove ourselves entirely, out of respect for her wishes. As expected, Patricia was furious, and so was my father-in-law. What surprised us was that the entire family turned against us. Everyone was angry, claiming we'd abandoned them at the airport and worried them unnecessarily. They still took their flight to Miami as planned, but that didn't stop their anger. They accused us of being irresponsible and selfish for going MIA, without a word. They were especially upset with me. They argued that Patricia's words didn't justify such an extreme reaction and that it was my fault for assuming they would cover my expenses for the trip. According to them, I should have offered to pay my share from the start, especially since I hadn't made much effort to bond with the family. They also brought up my lack of attendance at their weekly family dinners and the fact that I didn't participate in their daily online chats. Apparently, staying in touch online was something everyone in the family did regularly, and they felt I hadn't made any effort to fit in. Edit. I feel the need to clarify something because I've seen accusations that I'm isolating Lucas from his family. That couldn't be further from the truth. Both Lucas and I agreed that their constant gatherings were excessive and unnecessary. Honestly, no family needs to meet for lunch or dinner multiple times a week. At that point, it stops being about family bonding and starts feeling like an obligation. When Lucas moved out, it was to gain some independence. But what's the point of moving out if you're expected to visit every single day? Lucas felt the same way. We both decided that living a bit farther away and limiting visits to maybe once a week was the best option for us. His family didn't like it, but this was a joint decision, not something I forced on him. Blaming me alone for this choice is unfair. Regarding the vacation expenses, I want to make it clear that I never assumed or felt entitled to have them paid for. If they had been upfront from the beginning about me needing to pay my way, I would have either agreed or simply opted out of the trip. However, Patricia waiting until the day before to tell me they wouldn't cover my costs because I wasn't considered family felt intentional and cruel. It's hard not to see it as a calculated move to make me feel excluded. I wouldn't have had any problem paying for myself if that had been the expectation from the start. What bothers me isn't the money. It's their double standards and unrealistic expectations. They seem to set me up to fail no matter how much effort I put in. They claim I'm not trying to integrate into their family because I don't visit their house all the time. It's absurd. I've made genuine efforts to connect with them, but now I'm starting to think it was never enough. For a long time, I thought Patricia was the only one who didn't approve of me, but now it's clear that the entire family feels the same way. Realizing that has been incredibly hurtful. Update 1. Lucas and I are still enjoying our vacation, but his family is doing everything they can to ruin the peace. I've come to terms with how unreasonable it is for them to be upset with me just because I don't want to live in their pockets. I refuse to give up my personal space or privacy just to keep them happy. If they want to stay mad, so be it. But I wish they'd stop going out of their way to make sure we know how angry they are. It's exhausting, and honestly, we don't care. They need to let it go. Yesterday, they texted me directly, since Lucas wasn't responding, to say that whatever I was trying to do to their family was pointless because their bond was too strong for me to break. The whole message was so unnecessary and ridiculously overdramatic. I haven't done anything to break their family. If anything, their behavior drove Lucas and me to distance ourselves. Once again, they're refusing to accept that Lucas has his own free will. I can't force him to do anything he doesn't want to do. I replied, calmly explaining that our decision to take a separate vacation wasn't mine alone. It was something we both agreed on. Blaming me entirely was absurd. I also pointed out that if they treated me with basic respect instead of being hostile, maybe Lucas wouldn't have felt the need to create distance in the first place. If they were looking for someone to blame, they should look in the mirror. The text came from Patricia, but it was clear the whole family shared her views. They're convinced I'm controlling Lucas and driving him away from them. After saying what I needed to say, I decided to end the conversation there. I blocked them all. I wasn't going to let their negativity overshadow our trip. This was time off for me, and I wasn't about to waste it dealing with their drama. When I told Lucas about the messages, he told me to just ignore them. He said trying to reason with them would be pointless because they were too entrenched in their own version of events to consider that we simply want a normal, balanced life. Something impossible while living near them. The whole situation feels unnecessarily dramatic, and honestly, I'm relieved to be far away from it right now. Update 2. Lucas and I got back from our vacation last night, and it was such a peaceful and much-needed break. Unfortunately, that peace didn't last long. His family returned from their trip around the same time, and the drama picked up right where it left off. During our vacation, we'd had no contact with them. We blocked their numbers and removed them from all our social media, so they had no way to reach us. For the first time in months, it was quiet and blissful. But as soon as we got home, they wasted no time in stirring up trouble. After a long day at work, Lucas and I had just settled in when someone started ringing our doorbell like they were trying to break it. We didn't even have to check to know it was one of his family members. Sure enough, when we opened the door, Patricia was standing there. We told her we were tired and didn't want to talk, but she ignored us entirely and barged into the house without permission. I was livid. I told her to leave immediately. After how she treated me before the vacation, I had nothing more to say to her, nor did I want to hear anything she had to say. But instead of leaving, Patricia turned to me and snapped, telling me to shut up because she wasn't there to talk to me. She said she was there for Lucas, and I needed to stay out of it. I wasn't about to let her speak to me that way, especially in my own home. I calmly told her that she couldn't talk to me like that, and that's all it took to set her off. She started yelling, accusing me of isolating Lucas and trying to make her look bad in front of him so he'd lose respect for her. She claimed I'd always been a homewrecker, jealous of how close he was to his family because it made me feel like I had less control over him. She didn't stop there. Patricia called me a psycho and declared that she was here to rescue Lucas before it was too late. She even said I had no right to interfere because I wasn't family. That's when I told her I was glad not to be part of her family because it seemed more like she was running a cult than a family. That was the breaking point. Patricia completely lost it. Before I could react, she grabbed me by the hair and started physically attacking me. Lucas stepped in immediately. He separated us and forced Patricia out of the house. Even as he pushed her outside, she kept screaming, calling me vile names I won't repeat here because they were just that disgusting. I was shaken but took a moment to calm down. Then Lucas and I called the police. Patricia hadn't left after being thrown out. She stood in the front yard, screaming about how I was breaking her family and that she wouldn't let it happen. It wasn't until the police arrived that she finally stopped yelling. Her tone changed instantly, and she started begging us not to press charges. But we were determined not to let this slide. She had physically attacked me, and if we let it go, there'd be nothing stopping her from doing it again. We pressed charges. Since I wasn't seriously injured, we suspect she'll get off with a minor punishment, but at least there will be a record of what happened. The police took her away, and it was surreal to see her sobbing uncontrollably after all the threats she'd shouted just moments earlier. After the incident, Lucas and I agreed that we needed to take further steps to protect ourselves. We started looking for a lawyer to help us get a restraining order against Patricia. It was clear she was unhinged, and we couldn't trust her not to escalate things further. We also began seriously considering moving away. This incident made it clear that being within their reach wasn't safe for us anymore. We'd already been thinking about moving since this location wasn't convenient for Lucas's job, and now we're determined to make sure Patricia, and the rest of his family, can't reach us again. It's been a few hours since Patricia was arrested, and no one from his family has contacted us yet. I'm sure they'll be furious when they do. They might even threaten to disinherit Lucas over this, but honestly, it's worth it. Patricia needed to face consequences for her behavior, and I have no regrets about calling her a cult leader or pressing charges after she attacked me. She absolutely deserved it. Update 3. We successfully obtained a restraining order against Patricia, and it's been a couple of days since then. The last 2 weeks have been an absolute whirlwind. Between court appearances, moving to a new house, and handling the inevitable drama from Lucas's family, we've barely had time to breathe. But now that things are finally starting to settle, I can share an update. First, Patricia got off with just community service since I wasn't seriously injured. Lucas's family, however, decided to twist the story completely and paint Patricia as the victim in a situation she caused. They've been telling anyone who will listen that I provoked her on purpose just so we could call the police and have her arrested. Their version of events doesn't even make sense. I was the one who got attacked, yet somehow I'm the villain? Fortunately, most people aren't buying it. In fact, many extended family members are on our side, and some have even distanced themselves from Lucas's immediate family entirely. In a way, my comment about Patricia running a cult instead of a family turned out to be more accurate than I realized. Her expectations for her children were completely unreasonable and unhealthy. I'm honestly glad I had the chance to say it to her face. She needed to hear it. And if I ever got the chance to tell her again, I absolutely would, even if it meant she might attack me a second time. It would still be worth it. That said, it's highly unlikely we'll ever see her again. We've moved to a new house, and they don't know where to find us. We've also blocked all of them on social media since our vacation, so they have no way of contacting us now. Lucas is honestly more relieved than I am. He said before that being around his family felt suffocating, and now I completely understand why. If my own family behaved the way his does, ignoring privacy and boundaries, I'd feel the same way. Looking back, I realize how lucky I've been with my own family and with Lucas. For the first time in weeks, we feel free. It's a relief we both desperately needed.